writers, agents, and publishers, for the first time since the Gutenberg Press, find themselves lost in a maze of mystery as technology alters the shape of the publishing industry. Searching for Answers is a group of writers throwing pop culture, writing, and publishing into a crucible of clarity, passion, and humor. This group is the Write Pack. Welcome back to Write Pack Radio. This is your host, David Allen Lucas, author of science fiction and crime drama and president of St. Louis Writers Guild. And with me today is my co-host,
Kathleen Kayembe, author of Paranormal Romance under the pen name Cassette and Vita.
I'm Melanie Colany, author of sci-fi, fantasy, and nonfiction.
Brad R. Cook. I wrote The Iron Horseman and The Iron Chronicle, which is part of The Iron Chronicles, and Iron Zulu will be out this November.
My name is Jennifer Stolzer. I'm a children's book author and illustrator.
I'm Matthew McGraw. I'm an amateur short story writer, and I'm just going to listen mostly.
Well, feel free, though, to toss things in. And today we have a special guest, or two special guests with us, from One More Story Games. This is a group of people who Melanie and I met at BoucherCon in 2014, and they saw their product and want to be able to share with fellow writers out there, because all of us are looking for ways to expand what we do, be able to get in front of the public more, and be able to sell better, sell what we do, and get more fans. So with it, I'm going to turn it over to our friends over there. If you'll introduce yourselves.
I am Jean Leggett. I'm the Chief Operating Officer, otherwise known as the Hustler at One More Story Games.
Hello, I am her husband, Blair Leggett, and I am the hacker or computer expert here at One More Story Games.
And you could pretty much say that what One More Story Games is all about is being a digital publisher of the next frontier of storytelling. So for the last 18 months, we have been developing a software specifically for writers to take short stories to all the way up to novels and epics and turn them into an interactive reading experience that combines the ebook experience with the video game. And what that looks like depends completely on individual authors.
Jen, I think that kind of leads to a question you had sent me for this today. So let me go ahead and start with that question, which, if you remember it, if not, I can look it up.
I remember my question. I was curious how your company, your directors, your clients tend to translate a linear narrative into an interactive experience.
Well, really glad you asked that. That's the big question for writers when they get started in this. I can tell a good story, but is that going to make a great game? So what we find even that if you think of a story as just like a chain of links of just going from one to the next, and if you can tell a good story that way, then it isn't that much harder to put extra links in the chain to sort of put branches in and try to tell a story that goes different routes. In that way, you can have the story flow in different ways just by the reader or the player making certain choices at key moments.
And what's interesting, sorry to interrupt, we have a young author that we've been working with, and her story should be coming out in the next 2, maybe 3 weeks, just depending. And, like, for example, she's written 4 unpublished novels, so writes quite a bit. And hers is a murder mystery. And the idea being that you've arrived at the crime scene, you have things to look at, but you can't go back to the police station until you've interviewed her neighbor. And if you are polite to her, and so this is where the conversations with the characters. So when you're reading a book, you never get to talk to any of the characters, obviously. But in the story games, you can. And if you are abrupt with her, by the way, she has key pieces of information, she will bid you a fond farewell, and you'll eventually have to come back to her. So it's just one extra element of, okay, so here are the bits of narrative that I need to explore and discover, but sometimes I have roadblocks. So our choices as an active reader really impact how we experience the story.
Excellent.
So
Go ahead. Sorry.
The Skype thing is difficult. We usually have hand gestures to say we have something we want to say, and we can't see them through Skype. I was going to ask about how much extra content do your clients have to generate in order to make this an interactive game? Because obviously in a story, the detective in this case would talk to that witness and receive what they needed before returning to the police station. I assume you have to generate a bunch of other witnesses or at least a bunch of other conversation branches with this person in order for you to have like a pass wins, fail, abandon sort of situation.
Think of it as extra red herrings or extra information that may or may not be relevant in your story. And what we find is authors sit down, and because we've designed our software with authors in mind, they get very involved in creating beyond what's the normal canvas of their story. And they get to really investigate whole new areas and tell different kinds of aspects of the story that they wouldn't normally get to if they were just writing a book or writing a short story.
In terms of how much extra work is involved, it really depends. I mean, some authors are still going to write what we call in the games industry, or what is sort of talked about is like this idea that you as a reader or player, there's no real cool name for what we're doing, by the way. So if anybody has any ideas, let us know. Pleader doesn't quite work, you know. So this idea that you're in a cattle chute and you're just being herded towards the end of the story, that's not what we want, but there are going to be authors for whom they are most comfortable doing that. When you start getting into some authors that want to create a sandbox world, so you have starting locations all over your map, and the narrative, it doesn't really matter, or it seemingly doesn't matter where you start first. So in this, the other story that's coming out shortly, it's called Sky Carver. You know, I asked him for a word count because people are always asking, well, what's the word count? What's the word count? And what Sutherland said to me was, our writer, he essentially had taken huge chunks of text, and because you still encounter that node of storytelling later on, it's just repetitive text. So there might be instances where you create a whole story that veers off onto the left or veers off onto the right. It may come back together at the end. So it really depends on the writer and how much fun they want to have.
Sounds like fun.
It sounds like fun. And it also sounds like in the long run, the player, lack of a better word for right now, can end up with various different stories depending on how they play the game.
Absolutely. So when Jocelyn had created her story, I think she has 4 different endings depending on depending on who you accuse and which investigative path that you go to. Sutherland purposely built in, like his whole job is to create stories that show off all of the functionality of the software. So typically as a reader, we're reading through the book, we've experienced the book. Well, as a player, we can actually go, oh, look, there's a cell phone here. I'm going to grab the cell phone. I'm going to investigate the cell phone. So I can actually take items. I can combine items. I can give items to someone else. And the whole thing is built on this idea of, if I have done an action, then there is a trigger for something else to happen. So I would say that is really our biggest challenge with authors, is teaching them how to think just slightly differently and thinking of if-then statements. So if I go to Joe's Crab Shack and have a conversation with Joe and I'm polite to Joe, Joe will tell me about Diane's burning hatred for Mitch and maybe reveal that she stabbed him or something. I don't know, something crazy like that. Psychotic, yes. I tend to go to the inappropriate, Blair will say.
But really, I mean, in that if-then idea, it's you're getting to play what if within your own story. You're just trying to think of, like, what are the cause and effect that if this had happened first and then this, how would the story be different? What if, I mean, one of the things that annoys me in mystery stories is somebody calls up, I know who did it. Well, tell me. It's like, no, I'll tell you later tonight. Well, you know they're going to be dead later tonight. Come on. I mean, that's sort of that artificial tension that gets created. So it's trying to figure out what would happen if somebody talked to somebody before they were bumped off, or what, you get to play sort of what if within your own narrative. And that way it's kind of a game even for authors.
Mm-hmm.
I will say one thing, that we have a police officer who wrote the story APOC, and we currently listed it for $2, but then we realized our biggest challenge right now is getting a lot of free content so people can experience what this is like. So we'll be letting that go for free fairly soon. And so Mike wrote his story. This is the prequel to a published novel, and he had so much fun that he became an investor in the company.
Wow.
And when Jocelyn finished writing her story last week, she got up and she said, I have to do a happy dance. So I think it's kind of cool that writers get to experience narrative from a completely different place too.
Well, we've got 2 questions here. I'm going to go and turn to Kathleen first and then Brad next.
Oh, I was going to say, it sounds like it's fun for the writers, not just because you get to tell a story, but because you get to do more character exploration than you would normally get to do. Because if the reader-player decides to have an attitude with the characters, they're going to react differently. So you get to think of what they would say in these cases, as well as, the ideal scenario for finding everything out quickly.
Yep. Brad?
It's creating the consequences of the ways in which you interact with people, especially in today's of the anonymous internet. I think a lot of the times people don't realize the consequences of their action, and so we get to build that tangibly into our stories, which is kind of neat.
So if you end up acting like the internet troll on this game, you could be dead at the end of it. Go ahead.
Yes, hey. Well, people certainly won't want to talk to you, and that's... And sometimes that's interesting for the detectives in terms of how do you get that information? Do you overhear it, or how do you manipulate or / coax information out of people? It's where when we've said to other game designers, hey, there's so much going on in our conversation engine, they usually don't quite understand it because we've tried to build so much subtlety into the ways in which you interact with these characters, and the ways in which even saying one little bit of information can have a whole avalanche of effects on other characters. So that's the kind of story world we're trying to build up.
And while the system was built optimally with mysteries in mind, which is why we went to BoucherCon in the first place, we are in the process of rebranding the website so that it really says to people of all genres, listen, you can create interactive stories in science fiction, in horror, in romance. There's a huge romance market. Now, I don't know how you're going to make interactive romance, but if I sat down and spoke with a romance writer, I'm sure we could come up with all sorts of interesting ideas. You know what I mean? Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. So it really is, it's a simulation, it's a consequence, it's all of these things. The possibilities are endless for the kinds of stories that you can tell.
Brad?
Yeah, it sounds like it. Actually, I have a question. As a steampunk author, I mostly tell adventure stories, so this is totally up my alley, and I kind of dig it. But I'm kind of curious, are there any limitations built in right now? Because, we outline stories, and as we outline stories, we play the game of if-then, a lot. So I'm kind of curious, is it every tier I can create, X number? Is there any limitation to the number of different, offshoots I can run? Because I could create a lot.
Limitless.
I love that.
I think the big thing is just we have within our tool, for instance, if you have like the branching conversation, you can sketch out all of the branches, and it can be quite complicated, but you can always zoom in and sort of see how everything connects to everything else. I think the biggest trick is just going to be how to keep it all straight in your mind. But there's a note system in there. There's all kinds of stuff that you can use to build up the complicated layers of your stories. There's chapters.
And I'll say that I'm not a super... Yes, I'm the operations manager of a tech company, And I would say most of my technology experience, I've done a little bit of database work and a little bit of old school HTML programming.
Nice.
But I went through and used our software to create my little demo story, which you can see in the YouTube videos. It's called The Search for the Perfect Dumpling, because Barry does not have great dumplings. So I went through, and it really is, you sit down, you're like, okay, I'm going to start a project. Where is it set? Well, I'm going to start it in the city of Vancouver. I add in my map. I add in the pictures. And I just literally grabbed screenshots off of Google Maps and used the external stores. I mean, those things are in the public domain. And I added in pictures of my friends. And I started to develop the relationships between those friends. And I'm like, okay, so what's the story going to be about? And what's the sequence of the story? And, you know, people... Not every single writer is going to love what we're trying to do. I remember at one of the writers' conferences we were at, somebody walked by and literally had his nose in the air and said, I use a typewriter.
Yeah.
Oh, God.
nice.
We've run into those people before.
Well, know that I think
No,
it's really awesome, because as somebody who outlines and plots like crazy, you know, my plots and outlines can be huge and macro and scale, so I love the idea that I can just be limitless and kind of enjoy that, you know, that ability to play. So
Oh, it is
Very,
all
very
about
cool.
play. It's
Yep.
play for you, and it's play for your reader.
exactly, I like it.
And you know, we're really inspired by adventure games that Blair and I have played together. And what a lot of people don't realize, 48% of games consumers are women. And in a 2-year period, the women over 50 have grown by 23% as games consumers. So what is missing are the kinds of games that women like to play, which typically tend to be adventure,
Yep.
Puzzle, engaging, intellectual, like character driven. We want something that's different, which is why we're tapping into writers, because I think writers and the beautiful words that they create and worlds that they create, our testers have come in who have never played a video game in their life and have said, when's the next story coming out? Because it's that immersive of an experience. I get to control the outcome of the story.
I have a question. Could we just back up for the radio audience? Could you just give us a little bit of an explanation about what your game looks like, and just from a consumer point of view, what does the person get? Maybe reference your YouTube video that you've already talked about before, and then after you do that, talk about, you know, what kind of inputs the writer, the creator puts in.
Sure, absolutely. So from the gameplay perspective, what we've tried to do is to create a user interface where all of the buttons and the navigation look exactly the same for every single game. So when you as a reader read part 1 of a story, part 2, and then jumped over to a different author, you're going to know exactly how to explore a location, how to have a conversation with people. So I'm going to just briefly describe some of our pictures, our graphics, and I know that you guys will insert them and maybe even upload them to your Facebook page.
Right.
But when you arrive into the story, there's what we call a briefing screen or a prologue. Well, just as we're reading a book, there is the prologue. Within those briefing screens, some of the text might be color hyperlinked, and you can hover over them either if you're using your Android tablet or if you're on your PC. And that gives you additional context for what those characters look like, or more information about a location or an item. And that's something you certainly don't get in a book. So there's your briefing screen. When you go to have a conversation with a character, you have your starting conversation, which is also known as a base talk. So a small talk. Thank you, Blair. And that is just the initial conversation that you have. Like, for example, one of the stories that we use strictly for demo purposes is an elderly queen story called His Last Book. We don't allow anyone to play it. It's just for our internal testing. And at one point, if you accuse the widow of having murdered her husband, that's when you see the relationship or the rapport level go to red. So it's very clear that she's not a fan of yours. You're going to have to woo her. So that's one way in which a player or a writer might want to think about, what are the different things that might impact the story down the road? I'm going to come back to that too. The other element of having conversations with characters is one of the things that Blair has built in. I can ask a character about other characters, about other locations, about other relationships. So I could say, hey, Lynn, tell me about the relationship between Dawn and Pat. Dawn's her husband and Pat's his ex-wife. So tell me about that. So there are all of these more and more layers that you can go into. Again, if the writer wants to get really in-depth, they can. If they want to just keep it very brief and have people essentially cattle called through the story, that's fine too. We don't expect everybody to want to create super in-depth relations. So then the other thing is, speaking of relations, as you go through a story and you discover characters, Blair has created something called a people relations tool, a bit of a long mouthful.
Wheel. We call it the wagon wheel.
The wagon wheel. It's a work in progress, like everything is. And what it is, for example, in this instance, Dawn is the victim. And as we go through the story, we discover, okay, he has an ex-wife, he has a wife, this is his agent, these are all the people that have relations back to that one character. If I click on his ex-wife, I'll actually see everybody that's related to her. Why is that important? Can you imagine trying to read Game of Thrones? How much easier would it be to be able to read something like that and have a better sense of how people are interconnected, right?
Very true.
The one other cool element that Blair has built in, which is very suitable for mysteries, is the timeline. So the timeline, again, is as you go through the story and information is triggered, that information pops up on the timeline. So maybe you arrive at the scene of the crime, it's 10 a.m. So that little thing goes, 10 a.m., body is discovered. The coroner shows up and says, well, I think the body was
killed between
12 and 4. So then that will pop up on the timeline. But maybe later in the story, you go back to the coroner and he says, actually, the body was killed at 2:43 exactly, because there's some other bit of information that reveals that.
Broken watch.
A broken
That works.
Isn't it usually the broken watch, right?
Yeah, really.
But, so all of these different elements to help people visually see what's happening in the story in addition to the text. So coming back to what people will see when they open a story, for example, with Skycarver, I would say if you were to read the introduction out loud, the introduction to Skycarver is around 8 to 10 minutes. That's a lot of reading for a game, which is why we call it a story game. It's really focused on the storytelling aspect, not so much the game aspect.
But that sets the world up. And
So that's what players see from that side of things.
What do the authors see then?
And so from the author's perspective, what they see is our tool Story Stylus. And as we go in, there's a project screen which shows all of your projects. And I'm actually going to walk through my own story, the dumpling story. So we have an entire menu down the side that basically breaks down the story information. On that particular tab, you see all of the elements that you would put in for the storefront. Blair, do you want to take over?
Yeah, I think the big thing is for how, because it was the writing tool was designed with authors in mind. So one of the big things that you think about when you're first starting your game is, what are the nouns of your story? So who are the people? Where are the locations? What are any props or items that might be in the story? What are the events? And you create those. You can just rattle off a bunch of characters, their backgrounds, and how they all relate, but then you set the stage for where they are placed in the world and how they relate to each other, and you reveal the information slowly but surely to your audience members about, the nested layers that make up those characters and what's motivating them. And as they explore the world, other events may happen. especially if you're in steampunk or an adventure world or Skycarver world, for instance, your choices then determine the actions of the world around you. And it's kind of great to sort of be able to play with your characters in that kind of a way.
Players try to make it as easy as possible for people to go through and add in essentially the book cover and the introduction. He's built in a lot of complexity if you want to play with it. For example, you can have multiple introductions based on if I choose a male avatar going into the game, a female avatar, or if I chose a detective versus the sassy nun, because everybody loves a sassy nun, right?
Why would you pick a detective?
No, I had plenty of those in school.
And
Go
then
ahead.
all of the other things like locations and items and events. So we're working on creating a tutorial system. Some of the tutorials are already online, and we are welcoming people we're opening it up now. So writers are welcome to ask us for a free trial of the software. And in fact, we have a contest coming up. So,
We're breaking news here with you guys.
Yes, that's right. You guys are the first ones to know that we're offering up cash prizes for people to come and try the software, but also to make great content.
We had a
And
couple.
it's free to try, so that's, we're going to be opening that up as people want to give it a try for the month of July.
Oh, very cool.
There was a contest that what was the writers?
NaNoWriMo was doing somebody was doing a write a game challenge inspired by NaNoWriMo.
Oh, cool.
And but I think we were a little too late to the party, so that's why we're doing our own challenge. So yeah, I love the excitement from writers who get in here, and you don't have to be an amazing illustrator. You just need some, I don't know, you could go take photos of your own friends, or you can use Creative Commons artwork.
Did you want to talk about the mystery story in Tinsburg there?
Tilsonburg?
Tilsonburg, yeah.
Actually, before you do, we do have a couple of questions that are waiting over here. So I'm gonna...
I'm sure you guys have questions.
sorry.
We're chatty.
Oh, it's okay. Hey, we love it
All
here.
good stuff. No.
Matt?
Well, I wanted to ask about kind of reader-player agency, because it seems like you leaning more towards like the book end of things. I'm wondering like how much allowance is left, or how much allowance is given, because it's like you can write a thing where like you have 3 different options to investigate for the detective, but you could also write it like there's a 4th option where the detective like quits and leaves the crime scene and like goes home and then drinks some whiskey and falls asleep, and that's the end. Like that's something that could happen theoretically, but like is that a worthwhile option to give the reader?
And can Matt please write that game?
I mean, like, I don't know if that's like a thing that's kind of up to the author, but like how much player agency are you looking to leave for the person reading?
I'll give you a good example of that. In our first story there, the Mocaster murder, because sometimes if you can predict what the player is going to do, you can have a lot of fun with that. So we have it that you can actually go to the morgue and try to talk to the corpse.
Wow. Okay.
And
There
that
you go.
doesn't really work very well. So,
Yeah, it was sassy at me when I did that. It was like, this guy's dead. It's like, oh. Yeah, I played the game. It was fun.
It's really up to the player and the author in that sense, I think. And one of the other things, too, your first question about, how do you go about doing this? I mean, one of the things that our software allows is the ability to do versions of games and of stories. So you might do like a first version and then maybe only share that with 10 or 20 people. And they'll give you some feedback about how you can make it better, or maybe you've completely missed some logical connection. And then you can do another version of that story, which is better. It gets slowly and slowly more honed or provide more options. So it doesn't have to be perfect the first time out. You can continue to improve and rework things and present extra options. You might find you create a whole branch of a story that you've never thought of before because of some questions that you get in feedback.
Kathleen, you had a question or something?
Yeah, when I played, it seemed like it was built for. All right, so there are maps in the game, as Jean mentioned, and on those maps you can explore locations and people who are in certain locations. And the map was for a real place, and I was like, "Oh, this is cool." But then I was like, "What about fantasy stories? Like, how do we?"
You can make
do
your own
that?
map.
Not everyone can.
Yeah, not everyone
Exactly.
can.
You can make your own map. A map is really just a graphic. So on my desktop, at any given time, I have a picture of some tropical location. That could actually be a map. A map could be a picture of a Tuscan rolling hillside that I deserve to go to next year. And maybe a location is the house, or maybe it's the faraway vineyard. Really, a map is just a representative, it's just a word that represents a cluster of a world.
Yep.
That makes
So you could draw your own map.
One of the other things you're going to see with the Sky Carver story as well is that you can go into the locations. So then you can go into, there's the shelter you have to go into, and when you click on that location on the global map, you then go into the shelter building where you can explore room by room to try to find supplies that you need to take with you. So in that way, you could have your fantasy map, but then you could like zoom into, say, like the Shire or a castle that you want to explore or a dungeon. I mean, one of the other things we allow you to do is have what's called a dark map. So that's where you only see on the map that those areas you've explored.
Yeah,
so if you wanted to do like a dungeon crawl, it's very easy to do.
That is very cool. I'm going to turn, Brad, you've got a question, but before I do that, a lot of what I'm hearing as we discuss this, how this game works and so forth, it sounds like it's really geared for the writer / who's had a background as a game master, dungeon master type background.
That'll probably help you.
Exactly, that's what I'm
Yeah.
thinking, really.
But yeah, this is actually kind of fascinating. So I'm kind of curious. You were mentioning earlier before, like I can take pictures and I can do all that kind of stuff. Just how much like visual data can I give along with the words? Can I give you a picture for every character? Can I give you you were talking about the maps. Can I give you like the specifics? I'm thinking about this in terms of my own book where I've created, or I should say Jennifer has created a lot of imagery based for me. I've had an illustrator do a lot of stuff, so I would love the idea of being able to insert that into your program.
Absolutely, and the more pictures you have, the better.
Yeah,
and it's not to say that it's going to hurt somebody if they don't have graphics, but it's funny. We talked to a couple of people in the games industry who come more from the 3D games world, and they say, well, I can't see gamers really getting into this. I said, that's fine. Gamers are not our market. Readers are our market.
Yeah.
And the readers that have come in say, you know what, I love the photos. I love the illustrations. I love the photos. I love being able to see something other than just words. So the more photos that you have, that is definitely, yes, images that you have to your advantage. And
Excellent.
One of the reasons why we built this is it's not just, oh, I want to create something that I can sell, but say you wanted to create a 5 or 10 minute interactive experience of your next novel. So that instead of a book trailer, that is this fancy little movie, which has no words, which tells me nothing of your writing ability. So instead of that, I get a little taste of, oh, you know what? Oh, I like this guy's writing. I like her writing. I want to go buy this book. We want people to read more. We both have English degrees amongst other degrees. And so it's the promotional aspect. It's, as digital publishers, we provide royalties on an ongoing basis. And we really...
You own the rights to your work. We don't want to own your work. We want you to promote and tell your own stories.
The way we look at it is, imagine like a Britain's Got Talent or American Idol. You have all these people who've never dared to show up and be vulnerable and to be seen as creators. And next thing you know, somebody creates a story who's like, wow, I never thought I could make a game before. Like Jocelyn. Little happy dance that she was doing. Who knows? Maybe she'll get discovered by a book publisher or a Hollywood film director who loves playing mystery stories.
You never know.
We want to create that space where people can share their stories and be discovered especially for the early adopters, because the other thing that Blair has not mentioned is not only can you create all of these worlds, but you can rapidly serialize your content. So I create all my characters and all my world, and I just hit that button, and it populates them all into the next story, and I can create a whole new story out of the exact same content.
Where choices from that first story might impact even the flow of that second story.
Okay, now you're making me do a happy dance. I write in serials all the time. I love that idea. Actually, I have another question in the sense of how shareable is this in terms of, how many people can play it at once or the same story, or is it just you have an individual copy that is on your, laptop or your, device? Like, how shareable is this?
Okay, so two questions then. There was one previously that had been asked about how big or how much content can you upload.
Yeah.
And right now we have it set so that you can upload a whole CD-ROM of content, so about 600 megs.
Oh, wow.
If you wanted to. So bring it. And hopefully as we grow, we'll be able to pay for more server space and be able to expand that even further, and then start incorporating in movies, and we actually can already incorporate in sound, so you can have music or somebody even reading the text.
Love that.
So then to answer the other question is we this is a paid subscription model for the authors to use, and the idea being that I think the lowest package right now is based at 20 Canadian a year, which for I think is $14 US. It's like not a lot. And then it goes up to 120 Canadian in a year. And what that impacts is the number of people that can see your story and the space that you are essentially using, because we need to pay for data.
Yeah.
And also at the higher levels of your subscription, we also decided, well, we might as well just give extra royalties. So for the people who are supporting us in these early stages, those who purchase the $120 package, they get 30% royalties, 30% royalties instead of 20.
Okay.
And then we're trying to incentivize people to help us get more content done by the end of July, so we're even throwing in an extra 10% royalties. I know we're kind of crazy, but really we need help getting this.
We want the writers to get paid, and we want to get started, so this is how we're going to do it.
Yeah.
Well, let me ask you this: is it an app based, or is it just a download program to the laptop?
So right now, it is a web application, so you can run it through your PC or your Mac, I believe.
The games portion.
Gotcha.
And we are deploying for Android tablets, hopefully later this month, for the next week or two. So you'll be able to play it on any Android compatible tablet.
Very cool.
And that's for the game's perspective. And Story Stylus, the engine, really is Windows compatible only at this time. Mm-hmm. We've had people go out who've bought the $200 netbook just because they want to be able to create content.
We're trying to get onto the Mac. It's proving to be a little bit harder right now, but
we're kind of a ragtag crew. If you haven't noticed, we've been at this for 18 months. With we have raised some money from friends and family to be able to do this, but we're very much on a shoestring budget, and we're just trying to keep things going as quick as we can to please all the new people that are coming on board.
Well, a bit of a tech head. That sounds very cool.
We've got two other questions over here, but I'm going to say something before I turn it over. We got one from Kathleen, we got one from Jennifer. I'm glad you mentioned earlier about the rights remain with the author. I'm more or less talking to our audience more than anything else. Since you are based out of Canada, that takes care of any of the issues of international rights and so forth. So, Kathleen?
Oh, I was going to ask if you've done a Kickstarter.
Have we done a Kickstarter?
Yes, and it failed.
Oh.
It was, we did our Kickstarter, we launched it at the end of March, and I think the challenge was a couple of things. I did a Kickstarter post-mortem on LinkedIn, one of which
we'll
is...
give you links for that.
Yeah, if anybody's interested in reading why it didn't work, there isn't really too many people out there who are trying to do what we're doing, and the thing is, with Kickstarter, there's a certain audience that tends to gravitate towards Kickstarter. Not everybody knows about Kickstarter. And the people that know about Kickstarter tend to be more I don't know, they're early adopters. There's probably less early adopter writers out there than we think that there are, although we are meeting them more and more at conferences. So it was just a matter of our fan base wasn't big enough going into the Kickstarter. We have raised to date $190,000 from friends and family. So that's not too
Sounds like
shabby.
a lot, but it goes fast.
It goes
Yeah.
pretty fast.
So our ask in Kickstarter was for 40,000 Canadian, and primarily that was to go towards art and marketing and
Pay our people.
and to pay our staff who have really not been paid much. You know,
The joys of a brand
we've
new
all
business.
made tremendous sacrifices to make this work. Our art currently, as you said, or as you might have noticed, is it's mystery themed. We're working on getting the user interface so that it's so you as a writer, if you want steampunk, all of your navigation buttons are going to be in the
Gears.
same place. Yeah, but they're going to be
I
little
love
gears.
Yeah.
If you wanted science fiction, maybe they're blue shiny chrome. We were just watching Doctor Who earlier today, and I was thinking we need a Doctor Who themed
Yeah.
template.
That would be nice.
You know, timey
Little
wimey.
clocks, little timey-wimey stuff.
You
Yeah,
know,
that'd be it.
so that's really where our
But you can completely customize the look and feel of your game for your story. In fact, you can even change the theme while you're playing the story if you want to do like a Silent Hill kind of thing, or if you're, as you start to make tough decisions of whether or not you're going to be a bad guy or a good guy, that the thing can get more and more corrupt.
I think, though, coming back to the Kickstarter,
Yeah.
maybe we just didn't explain it well, but I will say that the early adopters that we have coming on board, and we've been in discussions with 2 international bestsellers for a couple of months. This takes a while to sort of go through those processes, but we're getting there. So the Kickstarter didn't work. We may go back to Kickstarter. We might not need Kickstarter in a couple of months.
Is there a place to donate on your site?
You can actually, if you go to our website right now, it says support our Kickstarter, and it takes you to our personal page where we've taken all of the Kickstarter backing rewards and we've made them pay directly to us, and we'll activate your subscription to Story Stylist, and or if you want to purchase keys to play the premium content later. Games range anywhere from $1 to $8 Canadian, and the royalties go back to the authors.
Most
at
of that
point.
goes back to the authors, yeah.
Yeah.
A lot of it goes back to the authors at the point. No.
The authors get royalties.
The authors get royalties, okay, yes.
Yes, you
You
have
gotta run the servers, that's right, yeah.
It is true. This is not just, oh, I've created an ebook and I'm holding it for you. We've got a lot of stuff going on behind the scenes that we manage on behalf of the authors. And one last thing, I mean, there's so much what we are wanting to offer. We want to create a whole space for author as entrepreneur, because you guys still have to be hustlers too. You can't just write a great book and hope that 1 million people pick it up. So we want to create a space for you to be heard, to develop your brand as an author, and to inspire other people to read your content.
And cross-promote and link back to all of your stuff and all
Yeah.
your talks. And,
Excellent.
We want authors to get paid.
That's ultimately what we
We
yeah.
do too. Jen has a question real fast. Go ahead.
I'm curious from the game perspective, are you thinking of branching out to something like Steam licensing or hosting on a more game-driven sort of engine in the future?
Good question. I think for now, we've sort of built up all of the tools and all the equipment to do that, and I think we're okay for now. I don't know. I mean, with Steam, it's another publishing platform, but we've built everything up so that it's the authoring tool and the playing tool very closely linked together. So it's something that I think goes a little past Steam in that way, but we'll certainly see in the future where that can go.
We're not saying no, it's just not on the radar immediately.
Yeah.
Now, you said that the rights remain with the author. When the people put in all their content, does it only exist on your server, or, what can be saved to the person's computer in case someday in the future your servers go down, or,
Sure, fair enough.
That's a very good question. Everybody should make up backups of their own work, to be honest. When you are working in Story Stylus, you download it from a website and it lives on your desktop. But
The tool.
but all of your data, you have to have a steady internet connection because your data is being live uploaded to our servers. So every time you change something in the description of your story, a little thing will indicate that it's been uploaded. So you do need to make sure that if this is something absolutely important to you, just back up that stuff for yourself. We do host with reputable servers here in Canada. They assure us they have backups as well.
Yeah, we back up every night. So.
And, that's something that we're very sensitive about.
But we think down the road we might be able to provide something like where you could have reports or saved versions of all your text. And that's something that would be pretty reasonable to do. And also, one of the things that you can do with our translation system, we haven't even talked about the translation system yet.
And wait, there's more.
Yes.
I feel like the ShamWow girl.
So one of the things that you can do is you can write your stories in what we call your default language, but then you can open that up to other translators to translate into whatever language you choose at that point and deploy in. You can export out a lot of your text that way. So if you want to get copies of the text and copies of all your graphics, then that would probably be the best way to go forward.
Oh, that's right. I forgot about that.
So yeah, that's something you can do to, if you wanted to take away and work with it on your own time, or
yeah, and it all exports out into Excel. So that's one way that you could have all of the text. And I'm glad you mentioned the translation system. The tool itself is in English and in French. And we look forward to expanding that because we didn't build this just for English readers. We built this for a global market. I mean, do you know how many Sherlock Holmes fans there are in Hong Kong? Thousands.
Quite a lot, yeah.
billions.
It's crazy. Everybody around the world loves a good story. And I think I, as a woman, I'm not really interested in a lot of the video games these days because it's about smashing candies or grumpy birds. And I want more. I want to know what the motivations are of characters. I want to read beautiful floral language. I want to be sucked into a world that's not just pretty. I want my brain to be turned on.
Got a quick question for you on the software, or at least what the software's capabilities are for the writer. Do you have spell check, editor check?
That's coming.
Okay. Well, that's a good question. That's a good thing to hear.
On their own.
That tells me if I'm creating a story for you or a story to put on your software, then I can do copy paste, right? I can type it on Word, copy paste it on there. So okay, Brad, you had a question.
You were talking a little bit about reporting. What kind of reports can we get? Can we find out how many people have downloaded it, or how many people, where in the world? And this might be an eventual thing.
Glad you asked.
Now, you all should see the little mischievous grin on Blair's face. So, in the games world, they're very big on analytics.
Yes.
So, yes, you will be, and that's something that is in development right now. You'll be able to see not only how many people have downloaded, you'll be able to see how many people made it through Chapter 1, Chapter 2,
wow.
Where people got stuck, where people left your game, which would be immensely valuable to you, especially if you're in the preview section of your game where you've given it to 10 or 20 of your friends to say, hey, listen, I need feedback before I submit this for publishing. I want you to see this. So you're going to be able to track all of those things. And where I like to talk about analytics, a friend of mine's written a really great book. It's a steampunk YA novel. And through Facebook analytics, she knows she has a huge audience in Egypt.
Oh.
This is a woman who started her story writing in Dallas, Texas, and now she has a huge following in Egypt. Well, analytics helps because if you want to then take your marketing dollars and get biggest bang for your buck, you might want to promote to Egypt, or you might want to hire a translator specific for that dialogue or that dialect in that region. So maybe you have a huge following in the Netherlands and you want to have somebody translate your stuff into Dutch.
Yeah.
That is very cool. In fact, you're giving me
So
more analytics
all of
than I
those
get for
tools
my
we
books.
hope to make available as we keep going to be able to, you can keep track of just, how many people are playing and, where they're getting stuck.
And depending on how much information they give us, like their demographics, age, gender, location, we would make that available to authors as well,
Excellent.
anonymized.
Very, very nice.
I'm stuck on sandbox worlds.
You're stuck on sandbox worlds?
Yeah, we mentioned them earlier, and I'm still kind of
Sandbox
curious about
worlds.
how to make a sandbox story in this world while still keeping the overarching narrative thread. Like, is it going to have a whole bunch of different plot warrens?
I think that might just be like an author side kind of thing, because it sounds like you can put in as much as you want, and really to make a sandbox, you just have to put in a lot.
Yeah.
Well, you need to definitely be aware of if player visits this location prior to this location, what is the impact of that? So, for example, in APOC, we kind of herded people over to one location. There's 3 locations on the map when you start. And if you visit his house, a little pop-up says, "Oh, hi, honey, why are you home early? Why aren't you at work?" Okay, so obviously you're not supposed to be at home. You go to the office and they say, "Hey, weren't you supposed to be meeting your informant?" So you sort of knocked off those 2 choices and you're being herded over to the third. If you had gone to the third one first, obviously those conditions have already been met. So it really is, you can have this huge sandbox, but you need to be prepared logistically in your mind. What is the information that is now available as a result of
All the things you've done.
all of
Choices you've made.
the choices that you've made as a writer?
One of the things we build into the system is what we call our script flags, or a flag system. So you can have, tens, hundreds of these things that attach to your story, and each one can be related to a particular choice that you've made or a location. Have you visited this location or not? And that then goes into what we call our scripting system. And so you can do this what if. Have I done this? Have I done this? Have I done this? Oh, then I'm going to give you this message when you visit this location. And it sounds intimidating and complex. It really isn't. As we sit people down, they get it pretty fast usually. And it just, you keep track of the information that is important for your story, and then you display what's important as you go along. And that's really the essence of the sandbox. You have this open world to choose in and go from there.
And I'm just going to add one more thing. For the lady that played the tutorial, what you might not have known is if you went back to visit a location when you're sort of doing the location hunt part of the tutorial, if you went back to a location twice, a different message popped up because there was a flag that said, "If previously visited, then display this information." So
It can be very subtle.
yeah. So there's lots of fun that you can have with this.
Yeah.
Kathleen, you got another question?
So I watched one of the tutorial videos, and I'm decently tech savvy-ish, I guess. But, it was still kind of intimidating to look at everything. I guess the same way that it was intimidating to look at Scrivener tutorials and be like, all these things, it does everything, what do I do? So how tech savvy do you need to be as a writer to create one of these games?
I think it's kind of like when you sit down and use Word, like a word processor. There's a lot of different things you can do in there, and I'm a computer programmer, and I don't think I know everything that, say, even Excel can do. It's, there's lots of buttons, but, even if you just have one particular area where you're working on, just learn with that, and it grows from there. So
I think that's a fantastic analogy, because if you look at the modern Word and you look at the ribbon on top, there are all sorts of things that you can do in that ribbon. And the other day I was doing some word processing, and somebody was sitting next to me, and I had created a little shortcut, and I pinned it to the top, and I made 2 columns like that, snap. And she goes, "Wow, it's taken me years to figure out where that thing was." So it's just a matter of becoming familiar with it and taking your time through it. It's a brand new software, but we like to think that we've made it intuitive. And as you go through and watch each of the videos, we tried to keep the videos to less than 3 minutes per section. And because you're creating an interactive story, and some people would actually call what you're creating a video game. So yeah, it's going to take a little bit of a learning curve, but once you get it, like I said, Jocelyn was doing the happy dance. That's the biggest compliment to us as the software creators.
Yeah.
It sounds like you have a ton of possibilities, and I love that.
It's like it's a toolbox. It's like a toy box.
Mm-hmm.
You can play and do whatever you want. We give you all the Lego pieces, and we can't wait to see what you're going to come up with.
I know. I'm really excited. We've got somebody from Bouchercon who's working on a medical thriller. We have somebody that's doing sort of like an Agatha Christie-like story. And I can't wait to see, fingers crossed that our two authors say yes, and we'll be able to work with them to adapt their best-selling books into something that you can more actively engage with as a reader.
Very cool.
Excellent.
Sorry, I'm looking through the Kickstarter rewards now.
Oh, okay.
I found them.
And we should list that on our Facebook page, shouldn't we?
Yeah, if you'll send us the details or a link to it, that'd be perfect.
Yep.
Can you tell me a bit more about the keys?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. What would you like to know?
How do you purchase keys? Like, what do you need generally for these stories? It sounds like you're paying in keys, not necessarily in Canadian.
Yeah, you know what? We've had difficulty coming up with the name for our in-game currency. So right now, all of the stories are free because that's our job is to get more eyeballs to the site. And people who create the promotional stories, like the 5-10 minute stories, I would not suggest they try and sell that. People will not go for that. So that would also be free. But if you made a short story game that's anywhere from 12,000 words and up, that you might want to charge $1 for, well, that dollar really is one key. And you'll be able to purchase those keys and be able to play for content. I don't know why we don't just call them dollars. We thought about calling them bookmarks,
Quills, pages.
I'm gonna be honest. I like the keys part.
Yeah.
I don't know about Brad, but
I like keys.
I'm picturing the old time medieval text tomes that you had to have a key to
That's
unlock so
right.
you can open the book.
And really, we just want people to get paid for their work, and it's not going to be super expensive. I mean, at max of $8, that might be anywhere between 8 and 10 hours of gameplay. But I mean,
well, actually, and I'm just going to stop you right there, Blair, because
Sure.
if Stephen King comes along and says, "Sure, you can have a short story. It's only half an hour, but I'm going to want $8 for it."
well, Mr. King, what would you like?
No, because Stephen King's fans will pay $8 for a half-hour interactive experience. I'm assuming, there are going to be authors for whom they can command that price. Do we have everything figured out? No. With ebooks, I know you guys can set your own prices. Maybe that's something where we move along to. I think what we're trying to do is fair and is a democracy at this point.
Sounds like
Actually, I guess it's a dictatorship in a way, but that's really where we want the authors to provide something that's of value to their readers. And I'll tell you, it's funny. So we had these women come in to test, and they went through Mulcaster Murder. And I said to them, one of the questions on their follow-up questionnaire was, if you had a game that was 2 hours that was similar to this, what would you pay? And she said, 2 hours. I would pay what I would pay to go to a movie, $13.
wow.
And Blair's just like, wow, we'd be rich. We'd all be rich. People in reality are not likely to pay $13 for a 2-hour story game. So we're trying to find that sweet spot where it makes the authors happy for their royalties, it makes the readers happy, and we can still support all of the traffic that we're going to be getting on your behalf.
Speaking of that, is there any plans for the future to make the games modular so you could, download them into your phone so you wouldn't need constant internet to play the game?
Yeah, we're just getting started in that regard, but yeah, that is certainly a plan.
Yeah.
And even then, there's so many more modules we want to include in this system as we go along. So, being able to have stuff where you're playing like a legal court drama or something like that, we'll write up the rules and we'll figure something out. We have a chase and combat system that's coming out soon that will allow you to, in a virtual way, in a non-action way, but just to put action sequences into your stories. So
we've also been talking to television production companies of a major mystery series here in Canada. And imagine being able to play some of your favorite television shows, maybe behind the scenes sub-story on a weekly basis, and, be engaged as an audience member in a more active way. So I don't know if you guys have been following The Walking Dead on TV, but they also have an interactive game. But they are limited because of their fancy graphics to how much content they can pump out. Whereas because we're more focused on the 2D graphics and more story, we can really pump out a lot of content. So if you as a writer wanted to be a full-time writer and you're one of our early adopters and grow with us, I really think that this could be a very lucrative and lifetime sustaining gig.
For storytellers.
For storytellers, yeah.
Definitely very interesting.
You got my curiosity piqued.
Yeah,
Nice.
quite a few of us.
Yep.
Any other questions? We're almost down. We're down to about our last 5 minutes. I think if I get my phone to actually work.
Well, thank you very much for...
Thank you for playing the games and letting us interview here and just getting a chance to share that with people. So.
And I hope that you'll all try Sky Carver. I think we're going to be publishing it on July the 3rd, and with any luck. And we've really worked hard at that story. I hope that that's the story that sort of gets people looking at, hey, you know what? I think Sutherland said it was close to 40,000 words. It was quite impressive.
Oh, wow.
And that's really the kind of caliber of story that we want to put out there in terms of what One More Story Games is publishing. And we encourage people, if they want to do interactive poetry. In fact, the story that we're doing after this is a comedic quest adventure with Romeo and Juliet of just the balcony scene. We want to show you can do a lot of different things with our engine.
Yeah.
Sounds good.
Well, I was just looking at Sky Carver, so I will definitely be checking that out.
Kathleen
great,
has
thanks.
another question before we close.
Oh, I'm just really excited that there's another one coming out, because when I played the after the tutorial, when I played the game that you had up, I was like, I have no keys! I can't play other things! So it definitely created in me the desire to play more. It was immersive and fun.
Great.
And I was like, oh, it's done! So I'm excited that you'll be having more content out soon for free. The other thing that I'm excited about is something you mentioned for July, the Write a Story Challenge. How do people find out about that and sign up for that?
How do they sign up for that?
Okay, so I hope that people will go to onemorestorygames.com, either ONE or the numeral 1, they both come to us, and sign up to our contact page. We are going to be doing a contest where it's at least $200 US for the top story that we publish. And here's the crazy thing. For every 500 people that read your story, we'll give you an extra $100.
Wow.
Oh, wow.
So that's like, hey, we want you to go out and advertise that you wrote the story, because it's worth something to you and it's worth something to us. And it really is...
What do you got to lose?
What have you got to lose? Imagine this thing takes off and 10,000 people read your story. Well, hey, for 12,000 words, you made a pretty penny.
Yeah.
So the funny thing is, so yes, you can go to our website and you can sign up. We're also doing some webinars coming up. So they're introductory, an intro to story stylists. And we will be doing regular Ask Jean sessions on Google Hangouts, so that if people are stuck, they can certainly say, hey, listen, I know it's in the FAQ, but I feel compelled to ask you over web. So they can do that. So contest, free trial of the software for 1 month, webinars, and really...
Talking to people about licensing existing content to build like little story worlds that you can then play with. So the idea would be you could create a story in a very recognizable setting, but you automatically start with the characters, the maps, the worlds, and all of that, and then you can add to it whatever you like.
Yeah.
So we think there's a lot of potential and possibilities here, but...
And in some sense, we're just getting going, but the engine is now at the point where we can have people come and create.
Yeah.
And now it's about creating have the art and the template cities for people to more easily create. Because ultimately we're doing a summer camp this summer, and we've got 10 out of the 15 spots filled up, and half of them are 12-year-old girls, which I love.
Wow.
It's like, how cool is that? 12-year-old girls are going to be making video games this summer in our little studio.
That is very
I
cool.
love that.
And
become little storytellers,
Exactly.
yeah.
Aw. Okay, also, too, I just want to say something. This made me think, and I know, Kathleen, you've got another comment you want to say, but here's an offshoot to using this software from the sounds of it. You just borrow your term. Okay, you got 10,000 people who've just read your story. Maybe you're not that lucky. Maybe you got 1,000. But we authors who pitch our books to an agent can say, hey, I've got a game based on this story I've written, and it's already had purchases of 1,000 people, 10,000 people who are already interested in what I've got. What do you think about that? Brad, you're my pitch guru.
No, that'd be excellent to be able to put into a query of.
Yeah.
Well, we can also see that game designers who are just coming out of school, you don't need a whole team of people to create content. You can create and prototype your own stories. You can use this for, somebody asked us for a small beach town down in the States, hey, would you guys create an interactive version of our city? Absolutely, we could do that. So it's not just stories, it's education. Mm-hmm. When it comes down to it, we really think that words matter and choices matter. And we just want to see more people create and use their imagination rather than be living in a world where you're just button mashing and that is how you play a game. We want something that's deeper, more enriching.
Because it's something to be able to create something that comes alive and then share that with your friends and your family. So and in that way we're all storytellers.
Agreed. Kathleen, did you have a final?
Yeah, what if you want to switch narrators mid-story for this July challenge, theoretically?
Well, we are working on that. There is, right now, what you can do is you can create the who you're going to play as, and I can show you on the list here, right in front of me. I mean, that's... So the idea would be that maybe you play a different character in a different chapter, or maybe it's like you're playing like the Scooby-Doo gang and you have to switch between the different characters of Velma and or, Daphne for different circumstances. We think, with as we keep going throughout the year, pretty soon we should be able to do multiplayer storytelling as well, but
that breaks my brain, just so you know. I don't know how a traditional writer will handle multiplayer, but
we're working on
it.
But
Blair has done some pretty amazing things with the technology, so I can imagine that he's got a pretty elegant solution for that as well.
So it's just different ways to tell stories, and yeah, you're right. I mean, it can be the kind of thing where you rescue somebody and now you can play as them, as a character as you go along. So yeah, a lot of possibilities there.
Excellent. Any final questions?
Make more stuff, please. That's a question.
Thank you so much.
I like that, yes.
Yeah.
We would like to thank you both for joining us on this broadcast, and stick around for a moment, if you will, after we close it all. And to our audience, thank you for listening. Tune in next week for yet another interesting topic in the writing industry. The new theme songs for Right Pack Radio were written and performed by Meredith Tate. All copyrights remain with her. Right Pack Radio would like to thank STL Books for allowing us to record in their office. STL Books is an online bookstore specializing in new and used high-quality literature, children's books, and books written by or about St. Louis. Please visit them online at www.stlbooks.com or find their store on the Amazon.com website.